Hello, my algebra peeps. Welcome back. Today's lesson is really not going to be anything new. It's still solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. I have one tiny little extra step about simplifying at the end. So if you struggled yesterday on the first day of this topic, just please know that that's normal. It's not an easy topic at the beginning, but it gets easier. It'll get easier the more you practice, So don't stress, at least not yet. So I told you yesterday that there's a song to help you memorize the quadratic formula, and I absolutely cannot bring myself to sing you that song myself. So I looked it up on YouTube and found one that should stick in your head very annoyingly. So let me see if this switches straight to YouTube and sings the annoying song for you. Nope, that didn't work. Let me see if I can figure it out. I'll hit pause for a minute.
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
So that should have tortured you enough. Believe it or not, it just keeps on going over and over again. If you go back to that YouTube, which I'll post to Edsby, that song will torture you, but it really will help you remember it. And this is one of those formulas that you kind of have to know forever and ever and ever in every other math class. So moving on, let's do a couple of problems. Here we go. It's still in my head. Okay, so you got to figure out what your A, your B, and your C are. So A is the number in front of the x squared. So for this one, A is 7. B is the number in front of the linear term, so B is negative 5. And C is the constant term, so C is negative 1. So x equals negative b, blah, blah, blah. But instead of an x, what we have for this problem is a bunch of a's. So that's a little deceiving. I'm going to call it x anyway. X equals, so you don't confuse it with the a in the formula. Negative b, if b is negative 5, then negative b would be 5. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 5 times negative 5, which is 25, minus 4 times a times c. All over 2a, all over 2 times 7, which is 14. Okay, so now simplify that. Everything underneath the radical, all of the stuff underneath the radical, put all of that into your calculator at one time. So 25 minus 4 times 7 times negative 1. And you get 53. And then all over 14. Now, sometimes that's the answer and you're done. 53 cannot be broken down any further, so you're finished. Okay, so my value of A in the original problem is 5 plus or minus the square root of 53 all over 14. And that's it. That's about as easy as it could get. Now, what that represents would be a decimal. The square root of 53 is a decimal. Okay, hit pause if you want to do the first one on your worksheet, or keep going. This next one is similar to number 4 from yesterday. I didn't realize I gave you guys that yesterday, so you probably thought you had your signs all messed up. So that's what we're going to address on this problem. Okay, so first pick out our A, B, and C. So A is negative 11, B is 5, and C is 20. So x equals is normally what we start with, but we have an n in this case. So n equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 25, minus 4 times A times C. All over 2 times A. If A is negative 11, 2 times negative 11 would be negative 22. And it's that negative right there that probably confused you yesterday. Okay, so now simplify and we get negative 5 plus or minus the square root of. Put all of this into your calculator at one time. 25 minus 4 times negative 11 times 20. And I get 905. Whoops, undo. Okay, all over negative 22. Now 905, let me see, I can divide that by 5. Let me see if I can break it down any further. And I get 181. Nope, I don't think that can be broken down any further. So if this was you yesterday, you probably thought that was the answer, and you probably thought, okay, what am I doing wrong? That's not working. Well, whenever there's a negative in the denominator, this guy right here, then they'll change all the signs of the entire problem because for some reason they just don't want a negative in the denominator. Let me explain. So what they'll do is they'll change all of the signs. They're going to multiply everything, top and bottom, by negative 1. But what that really feels like is we're going to change this to a positive. That means this is also going to change to a positive. And that means this would also change signs, but it's already both positive and negative. So you really can't change it. So what you end up with in your final answer is 5 plus or minus the square root of 905 all over 22. So again, what happened there? If the denominator is negative, change the signs of all three pieces, even though this one, the middle one, doesn't really change. Okay, number 3. Okay, number 3. A is 4, B is 6, and C is 2. So x equals negative b would be negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 6 squared or 36, minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a, which would be 2 times 4, and that's 8. Okay, simplify. Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of everything under that radical, put all of that in your calculator. 36 minus 4 times 2, and I get a nice neat 4. I keep doing that. And then all over 8. Okay, now this one I can do the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is just 2. So the square root of 4 is 2. It comes out of the radical. So now I have negative 6 plus or minus a 2. No radical because the square root of 4 is 2 all over 8. And now, since the 6 and the 2 are both integers, I actually have to add and subtract that. So, negative 6 plus 2 would be negative 4, and the 8 is still on the bottom. That's one answer that I can then simplify. 4/8, that's the same as 1/2. So this is negative 1/2. And now I'm going to do negative 6 minus 2, which would be negative 8. And the 8 on the bottom is still there. And negative 8 over negative 8 is negative 1. So those are my two answers. Now, by the way, if you get nice, neat answers that are fractions like this without a radical, then that actually means your original problem was factorable and would have been easier to factor if you remember how to factor when there's a coefficient other than 1 out front. Okay, last one, number 4. First, find your A, B, and C, and you really don't have to write those down. You can go straight to the formula. So A is 8. B is negative 10, and C is positive 10. So x equals negative b would be positive 10, plus or minus the square root of negative 10 times negative 10, which is 100, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a, which is 16. Simplify. 10 plus or minus the square root of, plug all that into your calculator. 100 minus 4 times 8 times 10. Oops, I did that wrong. Let me try it again. 100 minus 4 times 8 times 10. And I get negative 220. And as soon as there's a negative underneath that radical, as soon as you see this guy right here is negative, you stop, put on the brakes, no solution, because you can't take the square root of a negative number. So that's a freebie, that's a gift. So I hope that went better today than yesterday. I know it's not easy. Your assignment is to pretty much do a very short 6 problems just like those. And if you'd like, I can leave you with this song so you could just play it over and over and over and make it stick in your head. Won't that be nice?
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X is equal to negative b plus